Zimbabwe has close to 1.8 million persons with disabilities, and when the country's economy collapsed in 2008, the majority of them became poorer and some are still living in poverty. They suffer discrimination in terms of legislation, environments and attitudes. With this background, the National Association of Societies for the Care of the Handicapped, or NASCOH, came up with an advocacy program to address the bigger picture in terms of the issues surrounding persons with disabilities.
NASCOH is an umbrella body to 70 organizations of and for people with disabilities. These organizations are scattered throughout the country, and we have a physical representation in the country's 10 provinces through our regional advocacy committees. I am very impressed by the program that we undertook under funding from DFiD, or UKAiD now. The program focused at the inclusion of the excluded, that is people with disabilities. It was focusing on enfranchisement of people with disabilities to participate in the governance systems of the country, and particularly focusing at their inclusion in elections.
Realizing that there was less than 10% participation of people with disabilities in Zimbabwe's electoral processes after a survey of the voting patterns, NASCOH embarked on a 5-year program dedicated to ensuring that people with disabilities exercise their constitutional right to vote. The program, running in 14 districts across the country, is also aimed at facilitating their inclusion in governance systems.
At least with 7 major goals on these outputs. The first one, us participating in the constitutional making process. Zimbabwe was going to have a new constitution. So under that, we had 7,126 persons with disabilities who participated in the constitution making process, contributing also as officers, collecting data about the views of persons with disabilities. The second one was also to look at legislation which did not allow persons with disability, for example, to exercise their right to vote. So we had to interrogate the electoral laws and lobby for the amendments, which was done. We had also to look at the ability of our member organization. We wanted them to be strengthened, that they can represent disability issues, lobby, engage government, make government accountable for its action.
NASCOH, in collaboration with 7 of its 70 member organizations, intervened to ensure the inclusion of people with disabilities in the country's electoral processes and indeed in all areas affecting them. The Disabled Women's Support Organization, DWSO, is an organization that works with women and girls with disabilities and one of the 7 member organizations to NASCOH.
As people with disabilities, we found out that we were not in government structures. So our issues were not really handled properly at the higher level because we were not there. So we were advocating for us to be in those structures, government structures, from parliament going downwards to the local government, or even to be in decision-making posts in other organizations or in other programs. You found that people with disability were not there. But because of this program, we have seen that people with disability have started to know their rights and they started also to lobby and advocate for themselves. And now, as we speak, some are in decision-making posts.
Another organization that had an impact on the program was the Zimbabwe Association of the Visually Handicapped. ZAVH has been operating in Mzingwane, where they were sensitizing people with disabilities about their rights and encouraged them to vote for their voices to be heard.
This was one of the most successful districts, especially in the referendum, where we recorded the highest voter turnout. So we believe it was partially as a result of some of the efforts that we had done. In this district, we were able to convince the public about participation of persons with disabilities because we were able to present a face of disability in active participation. So people were convinced because I have a visual impairment, Andia has a visual impairment. So being the key drivers of the program, people were then convinced that if these people can do it, it means what they're actually talking about is something that can be done.
As a blind person, I didn't think it was a good idea at first. But after I was told to go there, then I had my experience. That's when I regained my confidence. And that's when I felt that I'm also a human being just like able-bodied. Oh, by the way, I was one-sighted, I was born-sighted. Then lost my sight in 1999.
A study by NASCOH revealed that the voter apathy displayed by people with disabilities was largely caused by the inaccessibility of polling stations and inappropriate and wheelchair-unfriendly voting infrastructure, the fear of violence, and the general insensitivity of election officials.
We went with the ZEC officers to adjust all the difficulties that we could face at polling stations. Some polling stations had ramps, especially on buildings, the drums. Some were adjusted so that we can, it could be accessible for us to go into voting.
Over a quarter of the country's nearly 10,000 polling stations have now been assessed under this exercise, and while many are now accessible to persons with disability, more than 60% are still inaccessible.
Most of our polling stations, especially in Bindra South, are schools. And we had a chance, wherever we met the people with the disabled people, we invited also the school members of the school development committees to also attend the meetings. So we did encourage these to ramp entrances for all the rooms they use as polling stations. And in each of the polling stations or each of the schools to create at least a toilet for the disabled people, especially the wheelchaired, so that they would freely use those when they come to vote. And this happened.
The swift response by school authorities and other establishments in constructing ramps to ensure access by people with disabilities is encouraging and is testimony to their willingness to ensure disability inclusion. The district councils passed bylaws that instructed authorities not to approve a public building that is not accessible by people with disabilities. The city fathers have taken it upon themselves to consciously cater for people with disabilities in their planning as they develop Zimbabwe.
We are working hand in hand with organizations which support the disabled through our town planning office, which we had mandated that whatever plan which is going to pass through his office, he must make sure that all what affects the disabled has been catered for. For example, we have got CBZ, which was renovated. Previously, they had no such facility for the disabled, but now during the renovations, they managed to put up a ramp which is good for those people who move on wheelchairs to access services through their bank.
NASCOH engaged the Registrar General's office to issue identity documents for persons with disabilities, as 20% of them do not have IDs. The electoral intervention was able to reach out to over 50,000 people with disabilities with voter education, has trained 400 people with disabilities as election observers in Zimbabwe, and has facilitated the acquisition of birth certificates for over 5,000 people with disabilities.
It was then assessed to see how many people do not have the prerequisite documents. I'm talking of IDs or birth certificates. Those were identified. Then an exercise was carried to make sure that those who didn't have IDs or who didn't have birth certificates were taken to the registrar's office so that the birth certificates could be issued. And we are happy that at the present, very few are left with all those documents because of one or two reasons, but the majority are now registered with the Registrar General's office.
When we started, we found that it brought a very big impact. In the urban, we had about 870 people with disabilities who were trained, also received voter education, as well as in the rural, we had 4,575 people with disabilities who were also trained and received voter education. Through this program, you'll find that ZEC also took initiative by recruiting about 28 people with disabilities who participated as election polling officers, and also ZimNAD also trained about 14 people with disabilities who also who took part as observers.
The college admin also saw my capabilities and elected me to be the student who is going to represent the whole student body in the advisory council at the college. I also want to say this program had a positive result in that it actually brought a lot of confidence in the community, in people with disabilities.
Great mileage has been scored in Chile for persons with disabilities, not just the visually impaired, but of various disabilities. So much so that in the last elections, we saw an unparalleled and surpassed participation of persons with disabilities in the voting exercise.
Self-representation is a major focus in the component of the program that facilitates the inclusion of people with disabilities in governance. For the first time in this country, hundreds of people with disabilities were appointed to positions of authority as polling officers, while others were appointed as presiding officers.
I'm happy to mention that I also emerged as the best presiding officer after performing extremely better than those who are able-bodied. During the harmonized elections, I was also appointed as presiding officer. I was also appointed as the deputy presiding officer for the Collation Center, and I was also called to go to Harare, going there as a candidate to be elected as a senator for people living with disabilities in the parliament, though I didn't make it.
We had chosen him not on the grounds of disability or favoritism, but because of the performance that occurred during the referendum period. He was the one who managed to identify the anomaly which was on the ballot paper for the referendum in March, and that anomaly that was identified by this district special voting officer made the whole country to have a check-up on the ballot paper.
Other appointments included councillors, while scores more became chiefs and headmen, and others occupy posts at various levels of community responsibility, in line with a well-known disability motto, nothing for us without us.
We witnessed the headman, Chief Nyamsawun, inaugurating 4 village heads who have disabilities.
Inini mudare mangu ndemondo tangira ndori nomunhu anowa mugurukota wangu andorama nourema arimo tototonga nyaya tiri pamwe chete naye kuno vanhu vanoona nezvokurimiwa kombe yetoti area committee kuna makomiti anogadzirana anofamba nakanzira titori nomunhu takaisa ikoko anorarama nourema kumazvikoro takatoisa makomiti ezvikoro mese mutori novanhu vanorarama nourema vari mumakomiti acho.
There was a positive image between the government, between the local authority, the ministry and Jairus Jiri, and which then created the necessary teamwork, and success was therefore achieved, not because of the abundance of resources, but simply because people, they were sharing the same heartbeat, they were sharing a common position, they had the same zeal to move and commit themselves to this noble cause. I call it emancipation and empowerment of the disadvantaged and the people living with various forms of disabilities and challenges.
The highest watermark in efforts around the inclusion of people with disabilities in Zimbabwe has been the election of 2 senators with disabilities in August 2013. This is the result of concerted lobbying and advocacy efforts by the so-called disabled fraternity here in Zimbabwe.
I feel highly esteemed and highly honored by my colleagues, my comrades in the disability sector, that they elected me to this position, and I hope to do whatever they bid me to do with a view to advancing the core issues in our cause. It's a very respectful position in as far as I'm personally concerned. My colleagues honored me, but they also honored me for a purpose. There are things that we want to put in place so that the playing field can be leveled out for the benefit of everybody in the disability movement.
We need to be economically empowered as persons with disabilities, also as women with disabilities in Zimbabwe. We need to be financial independent. From there, we can be realized, we can be recognized, we can be accepted.
We don't have people with disabilities in parliament. This is a yawning gap that I think the two, a male and a woman, in the Senate are just but a drop in the ocean. By the way, the country has a population of about 2 million people with disabilities. This is a sizable number to sit or unseat a government. The program has moved away from a NASCOH program into a community program. The program has now ensured that the chiefs, the crows, the headmen are in charge of their responsibility. They had abdicated the issue of looking after people with disabilities.
Although empowerment to vote and be voted for was the major focus of the program, the human rights training availed in the participating districts awakened entrepreneurial instincts and strengthened the resolve of people with disability to take charge of their lives and uplift their well-being in society.
I've been trained to live independently through a rehab. I'm a business lady. I own a shop, clothing shop at Koromanzi district, and I do cross-border trading. Yeah. I buy my things and I come back and I put them in my shop. I go to Zambia and I go to South Africa. At first, I could face a lot of challenges, even for my mother. She couldn't want to see me going to work or even staying together, because people would say I've failed you. As time goes on, she was able to understand. I'm able to take care of myself and I'm able to take care of my son, even my mother. I'm the one who's taking care of my mother.
Kuti ndizozivana nevana vangu vandakagara navo apa takazivana through Zimbabwe National League of the Blind. Vakanditumira kumarondera for training. Saka takatraina neNASCOH ikoko. Patakazosangana nevamwe ikoko ndipo pandakawana empowerment. Ndakaona kuti kuva nedisability is starting a new life, starting a new page. Zvakandisimudzira zvikurusa nokuti ndipo pandakazosangana nevamwe vachitaura kuti ini ndiri murimi. Ndikati munhu asingaoni kuita murimi. Saka pandakazodzoka pano zvakandichallenja zvikurusa nokuti ndakauya ndikati mari diki ndandinayo, ndakaenda kunotenga mabroilers. Ndikatanga kuisa mabroilers angu kuafidha. Saka kubva ipapo kubva ndatangisa kutengesa mabroilers avo ndipo pandakazobetserekana kuchero kuti pandizosvika panguva yekuti ndiwane mari kuno operator this year ndakaiwana through kutengesa mabroilers iwawo. Chero muno mulocation vanhu vazhinji izvozvo vakutotiona kuti vanhu vane disability vanhu vanonyatsofunga, vanoita zvinhu kutopfuura vanhu vari able bodied. Zokutoti as it is now ndinotova nema-broiler chicks mamo 150 aripo izvozvo at the present moment. Ndatoextenda ne-fowl run ndichitotenda kuti nyasha dzaMwari idzodzo.
I run a small company which deals in IT, and we are doing quite a bit of business there, and we interact with quite a number of people in society.
I'm running a textile here in Gwanda. Izikolo ziyasicela ukuthi siyadonatela izikolo nje zonke ngokusicela kwazo, but kule sikole engafunda kuso grade 1 up to 7 leso ngisidonatela almost every time. Kule prize giving day kumbe kakula leso ngiyasidonatela ngoba ngafunda khonapho grade 1 up to 7. As I'm talking now, ngiphumile ephepheni ku-newspaper.
The provision of voter education to people with disabilities by the country's sole elections management body, ZEC, instilled more confidence in the process and generated momentum for disability inclusion and participation.
It was really greatly appreciated that we would also participate. You know, for the first time, I myself began to vote during the referendum because I was also even encouraged by the program.
We had little knowledge about our rights. Now, with the coming of the program in 2011, we got some trainings which were being funded by NASCOH. Those trainings, they managed to enlighten us as far as our rights are concerned. And after those trainings, we came here and then we conducted several trainings which also assisted to enlighten those who remained behind.
I was picked up for training to be a trainee of trainers because of my interest in furthering the interests of people living with disabilities, in trying to make society realize that what a person living with a disability needs is space and acceptance, and not charity as people perceive.
The repealing of Section 60 of the Zimbabwe Electoral Act in 2010 to allow people with visual impairments to be assisted by people of their choice instead of election officers boosted the momentum of the program.
The ZEC people had allowed us not to stand in the queue. We would just go together with our companions and vote. But still there were some people who were forced to get into the polling booth with the presiding officer.
There is still a dire need for all the country's polling stations to be assessed and appropriate recommendations made so that they are rendered accessible to people with disabilities.
The people's perceptions, especially in the districts where we have carried out this program, has been that people believe surely persons with disabilities need to be allowed to vote in secrecy, at least with a person of their choice. So you would find that in some cases people would just do that out of that moral sense, but not out of what the law actually says. So this means there is still some lobbying to do.
Me going with my own assistant, I think it's a good idea for a start. Even though that voting won't be my 100% secret, because there are more than one person who now knows who I voted for.
Given that someone is using a wheelchair, my boots are too high for somebody, that person is forced to ask for assistance. Yet that person is able to read and write, can vote. But no doubt the booth, responsible no pane pen, ipapo. So that his vote is no longer private.
Critically, however, people with disabilities now feel more empowered to assert their rights and become involved in various community development committees, including food distribution committees, HIV and AIDS committees, community projects committees, and ward disability committees, which have opened up new avenues for social, economic, and political empowerment.
Kutakatera rikudi tiwa na nzimbo yedu tikakutaura takaenda kumadzimambo namadzishe tikapuwa garden. Tapuwa garden iriya rineri. Isusu vakaremara takaona kuti hatiri vashoma, ndofunga muna vanhu 10. Tikabva tatsvakawo vakashayikirwawo ndobva vaita 20. Tikatsvakawo vaya vanogwara nechigwere cheHIV and AIDS. Kunova ndiko kusection kwandosevenzera ndiri. Tikati uyai tiite mushandira pamwe. Takatanga riri sango. Tikatema tichigobora. Iko zvino pane waya. Takatorima. Pazvimwe zvatakatodya. Idzi dzatova seconds idzi. Muno mugarden hapana pakusarudzwa. But chachikumbirisa kuna Mwari ndechekuti sezvo takabatana navamwe vedu vakakwana nevakafirwa nevanogwara, tachikumbira kuti vari panze ngavachireka kudini
After the decades of living in isolation, people with disabilities are experiencing recognition and feel more accepted in their communities.
Okay, so I was given this Econet green kiosk by Econet, but me personally, I was economically empowered through this project. Right now, I come here, I do my work, I go back home. It has now become my occupation, my daily occupation, and I'm also looking forward to maybe empowering our fellow disabled people as well.
The NASCOH management, board and patron outlined the organization's vision, direction and the impact achieved by this groundbreaking program, with more programs underway to advance the vision. Immense benefits have been realized, and there is still unlimited potential for inclusion of people with disabilities across the entire social, economic and political spectrum. The NASCOH management, board and patron outlined the organization's vision, direction and the impact achieved by this groundbreaking program, with more programs underway to advance the vision.
One would want to see the access to land, access to housing, access to all sorts of other facilities, be it going to a hospital and finding walkways, hotels, walkways, and all shopping centers, walkways that enable these people to be able either to come in and shop, get employment, and find ways and means and in and out to any other areas. With respect to agriculture, I've seen ventures that the disabled people have partaken in which they can become masters of their destiny, employ other abled people to assist them in doing whatever they have to do. Remember, we've got disabled people who've been trained as teachers and even as drivers, as well as them becoming more mentors to other people in various sectors of our economy. I do find that there is room and opportunity with respect to disabled people participating in every other sector, be it mechanical, electrical, technical. So my vision, therefore, is that disabled people cannot be disabled by ourselves. We should find a way of accommodating them.
Resources permitting, we would want to cover the whole country. For example, we are only able to assess a quarter of the polling stations in the country. From the over 9,000 polling stations, we were able to assess 2,500, and 89% of them have already been modified. They are now accessible.
I believe that the way forward, we should look at economic justice for people with disabilities, because we have fought a war for their participation in elections and in community activities, and that we have won. But I see that we still need to fight their economic justice.
We have 7 sub-grantees, and they are all scattered in districts. Our wish is to cover the whole country, but the 7 sub-grantees may be just a drop in the ocean. With the 71 districts, I am sure we need more time and more funding.
I tell you, where I'm working, so they give me duties just like anyone else. Now I feel this should go even to other disabled people. NASCOH should not stop these programs. They should go on throughout the whole, especially National and Central. I tell National and Central is left out.
We must continuously carry out these projects. Issues of attitude change. It's not an overnight event. It's a process. So I believe that if such programs targeting people with disabilities can be rolled out throughout the country, I'm sure we are going to have people with disabilities being empowered.
The program itself is an eye-opener. It was like a pilot in Manicaland where we have got other districts. We also observed that other people with disabilities, they were coming far from Chimanimani when they heard about this program. We feel this program, if it proceeds, so that we should cover the remaining districts that are in Manicaland.
You headmasters who are out there, you DAs who are out there, you whatever leadership, consider that the place you are leading should be accessible to all, and this is the issue that we're talking about.